Okay. Uh, Welcome, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to this Code Red TV presentation um, on the issue, and some may say a very vexatious issue, talking about race. I'm your host, Calvin Wilson, uh, barrister, former senior Crown prosecutor with the Crown Prosecution Service, former diplomat, talking about dealing with anti-money laundering and terrorist financing issues in the Caribbean, Central and South America, and now consultant on a global scale, talking about those same issues, but also talking about the criminal justice system. Um, with me, I have Superintendent Rebecca Mears, local police area commander for uh, Aylesbury Vale. So welcome, Rebecca. If I can go informal rather than formal
Thank
with
you
your
very much,
title.
of course.
And what we're going to be doing today is trying to make it easy for us, you and I, the wider community in Thames Valley, because I'm the chair of the Thames Valley Race Action Plan Independent Scrutiny and Oversight Board, and you're one of the people who I will have to interact with. I've interacted with you on this issue. So what we are trying to do really is to start this conversation about race in Britain. And some people may say, Rebecca, that we are on hiding to nothing. That this is an old issue. It's intractable, insolvable, and we shouldn't go down this road. But I think it's important that we do. So I'm glad that you agreed to talk with me about this issue. And just to bring the audience into our conversation a bit, to say that the catalyst for this was when we talked about an event you did in Aylesbury about on the race action plan, engaging with the Black community. And I have to tell you that my conversation with you was very refreshing, and I felt that I could have asked you anything and you would have answered. And so that was the next step was this conversation on race. So welcome and thank you for participating in this program. Welcome to the viewing audience. I just want to frame the issue by reading two excerpts or two forwards from two MPs, one Labour and one Conservative, about the issue of race and why we need to have this conversation. So it was taken from uh, British Future, Bright and Blue. It was an event titled "A New Agenda for Race Action for Action and Race in Britain," and it was meant to design new proposals for action on racial inequality across institutions in Britain, from employment, schools, and justice to the NHS, civil service, and online. So it was trying to set this sort of scene to have a wider conversation on race. And so these two MPs, one was MP Rupa Huck, I'm sorry, of the Labour Party, and she spoke about race like this. She says, debate and discussion about race in Britain can be complex and contested. One's opinion can shift in the space of a day from optimism to a sense that we barely advanced at all. It is for that reason that we need to move beyond angry exchanges about language to a cool-headed discussion of the changes, the policy that could make a real difference to people's lives. Yeah, and I'm sure that resonates with you. And the other comment was made by Steve Baker. He's a Conservative MP, and he said, if we can navigate these tricky conversations in a spirit of goodwill, somehow containing malign political actors exploiting division for electoral ends, the price for a better society in which the color of one's skin matters no more than the color of one's eyes will be within your grasp. It is a prize worth having. And so, with that in mind, if you want to share your views on, how do you react to the statements that I read in terms of framing this conversation?
So first of all, thank you for inviting me to come and speak to you. I think my reaction in the first instance is, well, we need to start with a conversation. And we'll talk, I'm sure, about my Aylesbury event at some point during the hour that we have together. We can't solve anything until we start talking with genuine authenticity, with openness and transparency, and a desire to understand different people's experiences. I'm not Black, I'm never going to be. So I need to understand that from people that are, and what they've grown up with and what they experience to this day and what their fears are. The desire to move it on. If we believe it's intractable in the first place, then it's not going to be resolved. If we believe that we can make a difference and we want to do it for the right reasons and do the right thing, then I think collectively we can do that together.
Well, that's a good starting point, and some people may say it's ambitious what we are trying to do, but I think as the write-up says, it's absolutely necessary that we do have this conversation. For the viewing audience, we intend to be frank, open, and constructive, both Rebecca and I, and we hope to inspire fundamental change. So let's get into my discussions with Rebecca, or should I say Superintendent Rebecca
No,
Mears.
Rebecca, fine.
Rebecca, okay, fine. All right, so Rebecca, I've done some research on you in terms of your background, because I always wanted to find out more about, who you are, and the things that you studied and what impact that had on your decisions in terms of career. Um, so most of, if not all of your working life has been in the police service, if I'm right. Yes. Um,
Yes.
and so I want to know whether you had family influences in terms of having police officers in your family who were in the force, and maybe why didn't you possibly explore other options as a career?
So I wanted to become a police officer from a very, very young age, uh, probably around 4 or 5, when your relatives tell your mum, don't worry, she'll grow out of it. And I didn't. I
Okay.
think that makes me quite unusual. I understand most people almost fall into the police sometimes. There are less of us that kind of want to from a very, very early point in life. Um, there were 2 in my family, but neither of them I knew. Um, Both were a long time ago, and I didn't know at that stage either. So that wasn't the influence by any stretch. So if I'm really honest, I couldn't tell you where that initial drive came from. But certainly as I have gone through school, and I did do a couple of jobs in between college and joining the police, I always knew categorically it was the police I wanted to join. Something about in me that's inbred around helping others, not liking unfairness in any situation, and wanting to do the right thing and make a difference.
Mm,
And I'm just fortunate that there is a job out there that allows me to do that.
yeah.
So I went through school, supported by very loving parents, and went off to university. Just before I went off to university, I did a week's work experience, which was about the police, and I had a week with Metropolitan Police, which just instilled greater interest about what they were doing and what they were trying to do, and again, their commitment to policing. And then I went on and studied religious studies and sociology at university. Why? Because I was just fascinated with religion and how different people follow different religions, what they believed in, from what I'd call the traditional religions to the newer ones, to what some people describe as sects and cults, and just that breadth of difference. The sociology bit, which was minor, was purely because I had to take a minor with that major. So it was limited choices, if I'm honest with you. It wasn't necessarily
Mm,
my passion, but the religion bit was.
mm. So did that sort of embed within you this sense of the need for challenging inequality in any situation, as you said, the
It
religious aspect
certainly,
of the academic studies?
yes, certainly highlighted difference because of the difference and what religion brings out in some people. So there can be very strong views about particular religions, whether you are within that religion or you're outside it looking in. So
Mm,
that did strike me throughout the course, and we got the opportunity to go and stay with certain people who've belonged to certain religions that maybe were unrecognised or less well understood. So that breadth across those faiths probably did do something that I probably wasn't aware of at the time.
well, that's good because influences things influence you, unknowingly, and at that sort of vulnerable age as a teenager, um, you know, um, your sense of value, your values, your sense of purpose can all be shaped at that time, to take you to where you want to go. But knowing that at 4, you it was in you to become a police officer. It was almost like preordained, wasn't it, to do so? And
Yeah,
you did follow through every step of the way. So I'm going to take you to your current job as area commander in Aylesbury Vale. What are some of your main responsibilities, and how long you've been in post? Tell us about your current working life.
sure. So I've been in post for 2 years. My entire career, I've been 27 years in the police, certainly as a regular police officer. Um, my day job, I look after Aylesbury Vale local police area, which is beyond Aylesbury town itself. It goes up to areas like Buckingham and Winslow in the north of the county and down to the south around Haddenham, for example. Um, Within my team, I've got 200 officers and staff. That ranges from the response officers who deal with the 999 calls and our generic inquiries coming in, whether it be vulnerability, crime, or risk. And then I've also got CID teams, as well as some proactive officers, and of course our community neighbourhood officers who are so important in engaging and having dedicated local teams in the villages and towns. So you've got that closer relationship. And we deal with the vast majority of calls that come in to the police. We have a couple of specialist teams that support us, but they don't come under my command. So Thames Valley have over 2 million calls a year, and obviously a part of that comes into Aylesbury Vale.
Hmm. And what would you say is the makeup of Aylesbury Vale in terms of like diversity? Is it cosmopolitan? Is it predominantly white? How would you say that the makeup of
The
the
communities,
area, the community? Yes.
sure. So it's very mixed because we are a mixed urban rural area. So if you look out to the rurals, um, your likes of Winslow, Wing, Wendover, they are predominantly white. Um, the urban areas are more mixed. We've got lots of breadth of diversity. We've got a high proportion of Asian uh, members of our community. We've got a couple of mosques which reflect that. Um, we've got a smaller population of African Caribbean people. We have an Italian population. And there are a number of others, and I'm going to miss some without a doubt, that make a nice, diverse town, which we often see. If you go into Aylesbury, you can see a great diversity of people in there.
Good, good. That's good to hear. But there's always a call for the police service, to protect and serve. That's the motto. That the
Yeah.
police service should reflect the community. And you've spoken about a very cosmopolitan community in its makeup, which is good. But I'm going to just challenge you a bit, because on the Thames Valley website there is a sort of a listing of all the area commanders, um, and currently the local police area commanders. And currently on the Thames Valley website there are 13 of them. Um, and I have to say, I mean, I know it's out of date because we agreed, informally, before we spoke, that the figure is really 11. But the makeup of the local area commanders, the police area commanders, is completely white. So, do you think that maybe it's time for some diversity? There are 7 women. Yes, it's diverse in that sense. 6 men of the 13. I'm not sure whether that demographic is going to be reflected in the 11 that's really there at the moment. But they're all white, and the community you described is very cosmopolitan and diverse. And so I wonder, what is your impression as to, um, you know, this apparent failing on the behalf of Thames Valley Police to be in step with, the call for the police service to reflect the local community. What do you say?
So you're absolutely right. There is, it's not reflected currently in the current structure of area commanders. We have just had an Asian commander retire on us,
Mm-hmm.
and another recent Asian female officer as well, who also retired. It's a priority for us as Thames Valley Police to reflect our communities. It's been a target for us for some time, and there is considerable investment as a force to influence that. So explain, we have what's called a positive action engagement team. So they've been in existence for at least 4 or so years now, and they go out and specifically look to recruit and engage with people that anyone that wants to join the police, but specifically underrepresented groups, because we want to be represented well. And it's not just about visible representation, it's also about bringing in different views, different cultures, challenging the police and our culture, and how we work. So the Positive Action Engagement Team, PAET for short, has actually been really successful. And in the last few years, we've seen an increase to about 15% of underrepresented communities coming in to the police. What you will have seen, of course, is it takes some years to get to senior ranks. So it will take some time for those officers to progress. So within our strategic plan for Thames Valley Police, we also have development of our officers that are from minority communities. They're called the PAL scheme, Positive Action Leadership Scheme, supporting those officers to progress through the force. And the reason why that happens, it applies with the Equalities Act. It's still very much supportive of fairness. It's not about positive discrimination. It's about positive action. And what it's recognised, both women and people that are from minority communities experience imposter syndrome. They don't put themselves forward for jobs as confidently, maybe, as white heterosexual men. It's recognised that's recognised in academic research. So the desire to kind of bring them up to a level so everyone feels that they are competent and recognise that they've got potential to go, whether it be to specialise or to get the next step in promotion.
Okay. So you've made a very important observation there about the sort of propensity, if you will, for um, black officers. Maybe I don't know if it's the same for black civilian staff to put themselves forward for higher positions. And I mean, you've had a very long and career in the police force thus far, and you would have seen a lot. You've worked in Reading, you work in Buckinghamshire, I think. You work right across Thames Valley, and so you would have seen the different composition of the civilian and officer staff, and why, given your interaction with them over the 27 years you've been in the force, why do you think that is? What's the underlying basis for this reticence of black civilian, if it is the case, and black officer staff to engage, to put themselves forward for senior position?
So I don't know whether I'm even qualified to say why that is, because it happens to women too, and white women.
Mm-hmm.
So there's quite a lot of research around underrepresented people with protected characteristics who just don't. It's something like, so a white heterosexual man will generally put themselves forward for a job if they hit about 80% of the criteria. But people from represented communities will say, oh, well, I've only 25%, so I'm not going for it. Now, why that is, goodness me, is there an underlying psychiatry explanation there, which I'm certainly not qualified to explain? It's similar with imposter syndrome. So what we are responsible for, however, as senior leaders, is encouraging and supporting everyone to go for those roles so that we can give them confidence and believe that they can do it. And it's something about self-belief and that inner confidence. And bearing in mind, I've experienced that sometimes in my history as well. It's something that I can probably relate to, but also not fully explain.
Okay. But, maybe I'm going to sort of test you a bit. Could it be that the interaction with their colleagues, as they work, whether it's in civilian staff or in the officer staff, is it that the interaction, is sort of negative in any way that would allow them to say maybe they don't have the support that they should have? Do you think that's a part of it? And for you as a leader, you are responsible for all your staff, and observing your staff on a day-to-day basis and seeing how they interact to see whether you need to suggest things, to make changes, and to, as you say, encourage staff to move forward. So in your observations of staff over the years and officer staff over the years, do you think it's the interaction of, with each other, white and black, white and Asian black, it's just causing this sort of like reticence? I'm just trying to test you a bit.
Yeah, no, test away. So I would be naive to say that that's never happened and it's not the case for some people. We've all heard of media reports, newspaper reports, of people giving out experiences that aren't good in relation to the police. And I'd also be very naive to think that as a senior officer, I'm always told the truth, because that just doesn't happen either. We know that happens with the nature of hierarchy. However, certainly with my conversation I've had with people from underrepresented communities, specifically black officers and staff and Asian colleagues, I've never had it reported to me that they've experienced something that's put them off because of racism, because of racist comments. There's definitely been learning over the years. I'm not suggesting that in the 1990s it was in the place where it should have been at all. And certainly something that I have on my area that I know is across the force. We have positive action meetings with all our underrepresented officers with senior colleagues. So me and my two deputies will meet with all our underrepresented individuals on a one-to-one and talk about career progression. And one of the conversations I have with them is, what are their experiences? Are they experiencing anything that they feel is because of the colour of their skin? And to date, touch wood, they haven't come up with anything to me. And those conversations have been happening for the last 2 years.
And you
But
think,
as I said, I would reiterate, I'm not naive to suggest that we are perfect by any stretch.
okay, well, good. All right. Well, that's good to hear. So, would you say you enjoy your job? I'm changing tack now. Would you say you enjoy your job as a area commander? And tell us why.
Okay. I still love doing what I joined the police to do,
Mm,
which is protecting the vulnerable, locking up the bad people. And I know that sounds very basic in its basic term, but that's what we come in to do.
mm,
Reassuring people that are frightened.
mhm,
But also the other bit for me that I now love, because I'm able to so much more in my current role, and also previous roles, is supporting officers and staff to be able to do that
mm,
and facilitate that, and also see changes and progression, so improving in what we do. So being able to evolve and say we're better now than we were last year. We've built on our lessons that we've learned from. We've been innovative. So making all those changes to make that difference. So if I give you some very basic examples, on a bi-weekly basis, every area will have a review with the area commander, and we will look at what are the highest risks and demands for that area. And then we will decide how to best invest our resource for the next 2 weeks. So I had that meeting yesterday, and there were some key individuals that are causing a series of crimes in Aylesbury. And I named them, and I've set the officers in a direction to get those arrested. And this morning I come into work and 2 have already been arrested. So straight
mm,
away that risk had come away. I know we aren't going to have elderly victims who are going to be attacked by those individuals anymore. There can't be anything better than knowing that we're people in our communities.
mm. So it's almost like getting results, and that stimulates you. Is that correct?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
But in just the same way as the Aylesbury event did.
Okay. So let's talk about the Aylesbury event. Yeah. How did you get involved, and what was the catalyst for that, and who did you engage with, and was it an easy task? And at
Okay.
the end of it all, was it successful? Were you pleased? As you are as a police officer, were you pleased with your interaction with the Black community there?
Sure. So I started this whole process before the Police Race Action Plan, which is a
Mm,
national plan around improving trust and confidence with the African Caribbean community. And I started it because I knew there was a gap on my area of engagement with my Black community, which is about 3 to 4% of my area. So I wanted to start a discussion. I was introduced, following my request from another partner that I work with, to a lady who actually run a local DWP centre, unemployment centre, and she was Black. We met and hit it off, and it snowballed from there, basically. We talked about community event, how we wanted to build the relationship between us and the police and the community. So we started creating a working group from that. The plus was that she had some great connections with the local churches. She brought some pastors in, all of whom were very open. And we went and met in a local restaurant, in an African Caribbean restaurant, actually. And I chose that specifically because we weren't on police premises. I
mm,
wanted it to be relaxed, like we are chatting now. I wanted us to be open, and start a conversation and see if we could progress anywhere towards some kind of community event. And we had some really difficult conversations during that evening, about the history of policing and the Black community, internationally and nationally, because there was one gentleman, for example, live in Ghana, around that table, and he gave a story where they weren't allowed to walk on the pavement in Ghana when he was growing up. So he moved to this country, and has settled here. So we talked about that. We talked about some of the real difficulties. Stephen Lawrence, how has it moved on, or has it at all moved on from the murder of Stephen Lawrence? But we all agreed that we wanted to do something together. And we built from that moment on, okay, well, how are we going to do that? We all went online and we met every couple of weeks for about maybe 9 months, building towards a police, an African Caribbean local event. And what I did was, in effect, use the energy and passion that I had around that table with a neighbourhood inspector. And I brought in a couple of my officers who were black. But the majority was led by the community. And around that table, I had people that were passionate about singing, passionate about music, and a couple of other skills that we thought we could bring together. So what we ended up with was, in April of this year, Spring Gospel. Lots of discussion over what we were going to call it, but we didn't want it to be specifically police. We didn't want it to be specifically faith-based, because we didn't want to exclude anyone that wasn't religious. And we had all the local black businesses represented. They all came and did a stall. It ranged from people with financial services to selling clothes to selling jewellery. We also had some local support services. The reason why we did that was we know that underrepresented groups don't necessarily take up the services that are available to them. So, for example, from the council, so we wanted to highlight some of them. And other services where we needed the help of the black communities. So, for example, adoption and fostering are in desperate need of black families to take black children, because there is a fear from black children about going into white families and not knowing how to behave, because each family and each cultural group has different patterns and behaviours. So we brought all them together, which was great. And then we also had a stage where a number of African Caribbean choirs and bands came together and sang and entertained. I also set up with a lady called Sam, who was an amazing singer and was kind of my partner in crime, for want of a better word, for this event. And we set up a police community choir to learn gospel. And we presented a few songs, sang a few songs during the day at the event. And then all great events involve food, don't they? So we also had 2 local companies come in, African Caribbean companies bringing in local food. So we broke to eat in the middle of it. And I had a lead speaker, also from the black community, talking about his experience, because he'd been in organised crime as a young boy, got into quite serious trouble in the police, did some time in prison, very close to losing his life. And he talked about how he saw the police leading up to that point and after that point. Quite an inspiring event and discussion. 200 people turned up, 99% of them were black, which I was overwhelmed at. Lots of challenges around marketing and trying to get it out to the right people. That was our biggest challenge, and I never ever properly resolved that. Some challenges around in the group with different views on how we should present it and how we should advertise it. So an example would be, at the very beginning, it was felt we shouldn't put police on the posters, because it was felt from the community, some of the community members on the group, that might put people off coming because of the trust and confidence issue. Right. That was against my better judgment, but I went with the community. But later on down the line, they very much went against that, and there was a different view. So we ended up with putting the police on there and making a comment about how this was a joint event and largely led by the community. So overall, we sought feedback at the end of it, and everything was incredibly positive. I was personally very overwhelmed by it. Community leads that had got involved called it truly powerful. Other people saying, amazing day, want to do this again, please bring it back. Just so uplifting, energy, positivity. So definitely a good start.
Right.
And what it led to then was members wanting to volunteer to come forwards with us for future events. It gave us an opportunity to get a black member onto our IAG, which is in an independent advisory group, which are groups that actually came out of the Stephen Lawrence murder, where they hold the police to account for what's going on in the local area, policies and procedures, behaviours of officers, performance, and all of that kind of thing. So we've now got some key members on our scrutiny panel as well, who also look at some of what we do from a stop search perspective, and they view body-worn video and again test and challenge and ask and question what we're doing, and rightly so. So it's all been incredibly positive, and we're starting to hopefully organise our next event at the moment.
Okay, well, that's very good to hear, and congratulations. And I have to tell you, you have to be going to give you some flowers. I don't know if Simon can put it up on the screen, to praise you for what you've done. Because as part of my research, I asked around as to what they thought of you, and the response was very positive. So what you in terms of your contribution, your involvement, your outreach to the community. In fact, they said one comment was that you were a model commander, a model
Oh,
commander.
that's lovely.
And
That's lovely.
this is from someone who knows the community and who speaks her mind. She's not afraid to speak her mind, and so congratulations. And I hope that you will continue to become more involved. Creating more events. If you're staying in Aylesbury, because I know your vista aren't limit your vista isn't limited in terms of career projection. But if you do stay there, then hopefully you can become more ingrained with the community and maybe have some of these conversations that we're having,
Yeah.
to build upon what you've done already. So congratulations. But I want to ask you
Thank you
some
very
difficult questions. I'm going to ask you some difficult questions. I'm going to take you back to the community, and the community is made up. You say 4% Black and
Yes.
African and Caribbean people, and
Yes.
the wider community. There's a difficulty with trust and confidence in the police by our Black community, African and Caribbean. And so tell me, do you think that based upon your experience or maybe things that you've seen, that there's the good things that you saw in the community for that event, the spring gospel event, is that reflective of all the things that goes on that go on in the community, or are there incidents where things go awry, and you've had to respond in a certain way? You've seen officers interact with with the Black and Caribbean community, African and Caribbean community, and do you think it's always on the level, or is there room for improvement? Do those interactions reflect badly on the police in terms of lack of trust and confidence, and the responses of the community themselves, to being engaged with your officers? What would you say?
Sure. Lots of questions. So
I
remind me
know,
if
I
I
know.
don't hit all of those questions.
Okay.
Remind me if I don't hit all of them. So we have a culture of continuous improvement in the police. So we should never rest on our laurels and say we're getting it right. And I also would be fairly daft to say that, quite honestly. There we have very young officers who come in, and we tutor them, we coach them, and there are times when we don't get it right. So, for example, fairly recently, we identified, when I talk about the scrutiny panels earlier on, we do a lot of work around the stop search to look for disproportionality, to make sure that they are carrying out that very strong power legally, and they're following all the rules, which includes a really clear rationale as to why they're stopping someone and searching them. And we found fairly recently on the area an officer who had completed 2 stop searches on 2 black lads, and we weren't comfortable with how he'd recorded them and his rationale behind it. So, so straight away, I can tell you that there is some things which we see that actually we're not comfortable with. But I think the reassurance that I can give you is as soon as that's identified, we intervene. It either goes, if it's sufficiently serious enough and it hits a particular standard which is set nationally, it will of course go into our professional standards department, or equally if it's at criminal level, it would also go to them. Or we also can deal with it as a learning opportunity, and explain why the standard of their submissions of their stop search isn't up to the standard we would like, understanding why they did it if it's not recorded on the stop search form, and go through a process with them to get them to the point where the next stop search they do is quality, whether it be on a white person, black person, or anyone else. So without a doubt, there's always room for improvement, definitely. Yeah, which is why the data and the performance that we use, and the body worn footage, so all officers now have to wear body worn video for stop searching. That takes an awful lot of the unknown out of it, because you've got you've got 2 people in a stop search. You've got a police officer and you've got the person being searched. Sometimes you have people watching. That's the nature of being recorded as well, and it being put on YouTube or social media. But the body worn is so much more useful now, because that provides that independent witness and there's no question about what's happened. So that's helpful. In terms of trust and confidence in the community, even in the Spring Gospel and the conversations I had with lots of people during that, there was a real breadth of difference between some that are very much open, trusting of the police, haven't had a bad experience, haven't really spoken, as far as I'm aware, because we've had these conversations, or known anyone that's had a bad experience with the police. You then go to the other extreme where people absolutely have, and they've talked about that, not necessarily with Thames Valley Police, and it not necessarily them personally, but they might have known someone in their family or a friend. And then you've got people in the middle that just either heard something but don't know it themselves, have got mixed views. But I think the thing that struck me, the most impactful thing that I was told around this was several parents talked about bringing up their sons, particularly, less so with the girls, and having to talk to them about if they get stopped by the police, and how they should behave respectfully and don't argue and follow instruction. And what that led me to do was then ask, because I'm not a parent myself, to ask other parents, white parents, Asian parents, do they do similar? And not all did. Some did. So, in fact, one of my colleagues did with his son, around what happens. And my question was, well, did you do that because you're a police officer? So is it because you know what the possibility is? But it did strike me that that was a theme that had come out of several conversations, which tells me that they feel that there is a increased likelihood that their sons will be stopped. So you
yes, continue your train of thought. No, continue your train of thought. Yeah.
Sorry, I've lost my train of thought. Don't worry.
Okay, but what I wanted to draw upon you. I mean, I think you've answered all the questions that I asked in this very long question, but I wanted to take up with you the issue of advice to young people about by parents, black children, about engaging with the police, because, and I'm not sure this is a London thing or whether it's a global, across a national thing, but it seems to me, based upon the experiences that I've had and parents coming telling me what's happening, it seems to me that there is there is a sort of a move to engage with young black boys when they are just verging on being a teenager, and it's almost as though it's shepherding them into the criminal justice system. Would you agree with that, or do you think that you know, or are you seeing those things? Do you think that there's a valid concern, and by parents as to why their young teenage boys are being stopped, um, and being caused a lot of trauma by those stops at that age? Um, you know, um, you seem to take on board the fact that it's done, but do you think that's a pattern that you're discerning, based upon your experience or what you're hearing anecdotally? Um,
So, I mean, the most reliable figures we'll look at will tell us where we're at with stops and is that's happening. And I can't speak for every force. I don't know every force's statistics, but generally, black people are stop searched more. If it's much younger, if it's under 18, that's a different perspective, because there are different rules around under 18s and stop search. But there is a high proportion of black people stop searched, and that has been a focus for a long time. It's called disproportionality, and whether it's systems issue, whether there is unconscious bias in the officers. And what we've done over a number of years is we've got dedicated teams now in Thames Valley Police that look at all the reasons and rationale behind each individual stop search, but also things like certain operations in certain areas. So if there is a high density of a particular underrepresented group in an area that's being hit by crime and the suspects are of that background too, that heritage, then it's likely that stop search will increase in that area for that time being. But equally, there is also a responsibility to bring down that disproportionality where it's not justified. So this is probably one of the biggest challenges that we have in the police, and absolutely being held to account by the public for it. That goes back to our training, our education. We have a code of ethics around fairness, openness, and obviously the racism absolutely falls within that, and being anti-racist. It's not as simple as the figures just in itself. If you look at the figures in isolation, it probably looks a little bit worse than it does if you start understanding it underneath it. But we still need to get it down. There's no doubt about that. Still need to get it lower.
And one of the failings of the police generally, it seems as though that data on ethnicity and involvement with the Black community, Asian community, mixed race community as well, that data isn't always kept properly. Do you think that Thames Valley, falls in that category? Is there room for improvement as to how you keep your data on your stop and search for Black people, and your, you're going to talk about caution, and we're heading towards 10 to the hour, but do you think that your area, let's say your area, Aylesbury, captures the data for your small population of Black people, African Caribbean people? Do you think that you adequately capture those figures?
So we have. So always go back to there's always room for improvement. However, we do have a really thorough recording system and a really clear set of data that's produced on a monthly, but can be accessed daily, I might add, but equally could be reviewed at any point, which tells us exactly how many people are stop searched, what ethnicity they self-define as, because there is a process in stop search where they self-define. Some people choose not to define, so we have to record that as well. But there is a thorough set of data in Thames Valley Police around stop search. Always room for improvement, always.
Yeah. All right, so stop and search. How do you treat with cautions for Black people, Black and Asian people? Cautions. Someone is brought into the station, or maybe they were, it's drugs or for whatever offense, minor theft, whatever, and you have the option of giving them a caution. You know, what would you say is
Yes.
the sort of approach to Black people as compared to white offenders?
So this is something that I'm less conscious of in terms of our data. Um, there is a really clear steer nationally around when we can apply. These are called out of court disposals now.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
from a legal perspective, there's a breadth of out of court disposals which can include a caution. You're only allowed to apply cautions in certain instances. So, for example, someone that's got previous convictions or a lengthy list of encounters with the police, which has led to a record for them, will preclude a caution on a number of occasions. So cautions are largely for lower level offending, first time offenders, quite often above 18, because below 18 there is a different process for young people. And that's probably even more important because we don't want to criminalise children. So what we do with young people under 18 is it goes into what's called a youth offending service. And there again is a very, very strict process of determining if they will get the caution or not, if they will get some kind of reprimand. It's not quite as free as maybe it was in years gone by. So it shouldn't be as vague or as disproportionate as possibly it has been in the past, if that helps.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Rapid fire now. Handcuffs and the Black community. The use of handcuffs on as a matter of course by officers in your area or in Thames Valley when Black people are arrested. What would you say is the sort of your impressions on that?
So my impressions are that there is a more natural use of handcuffs in certain circumstances. I'm not conscious that it's been influenced by the ethnicity or the heritage of the person that's been arrested. I could be proven wrong on that one. We are required to record use of force. It's called use of force. There's lots of terminology in policing, and we're required to record it. So we can actually go back to ethnicity and whether handcuffs, which is a use of force, is used.
Okay. Let's go now to strip search. You know, I would say, and lots of people would say, it's voyeurism, plain and simple. The strip searching of Black men, young Black men, mature Black men, uh, voyeurism and humiliation. What would you say?
So I would disagree with the voyeurism and equally the humiliation. It's a very, very strong power. I would start off by that, saying that. We don't take it lightly. There has to be a clear justification. So first off, the person has to be taken into custody and the custody sergeant has to agree it. So you've got kind of a dual process of the officer in the first place making the decision that they would like to do this. And there has to be very clear rationale and justification, which means that there has been clearly some ingress of, for example, drugs, and there's got to be it's not a matter of guesswork, shall we say. It's got to be something more substantial, far more substantial than that. And the point being is that we're trying to prevent crime and save life. And if they've hidden a knife or drugs, then that has to be done, but it's not taken lightly. And as we've seen in the press, there has been lots of challenge over young people and black. I think there's a black girl fairly recently where there were a lot of challenges around that. And again, rightly so, we police by consent, so we must be challenged by the public on what we do. But in terms of it's not voyeuristic, and having had to do that as my PC myself and take someone in to strip search them, because obviously females strip search females, it's a very uncomfortable thing. It's nothing that any enjoyment comes out of. And we do it with the best of intentions and maintaining an individual's dignity as much as possible.
Okay. And do you agree it causes lots of trauma for the individual? Strip searching.
Oh, yes, you cannot avoid the fact that being strip searched is a most unpleasant experience for the person going through it. And absolutely, we can't avoid that. It's human nature, isn't it, to if it's not your choice, that's not a good thing to be going through at all.
All right. Comparatively, black and white defendants, do they get more prison time in terms of like
Yeah.
before they're brought to court, and they're charged with more serious offences? What would you say, black and white comparison, based upon what you've seen?
So there is, yeah, so there is recognised issue around disproportionality in the criminal justice system in terms of convictions, number of black people in prisons, in our prison system. That is completely recognised, and there is a national plan around trying to remove the systemic issues and policies that might be leading to that, trying to identify what they are. I'm not involved in that piece of work at all. Trying to work out what's leading to that. But yeah, we can't ignore it. It's there. It's very clear to be there.
Okay.
And we've got to continue as part of the police race action plan. That's the whole part of it. It's the whole approach is from beginning to end of policing and beyond, because it's not just policing. We've got the societal issues that you mentioned earlier on, education, housing, welfare, all of those things contributing to a bigger picture. And I think that's the holistic piece. I think sometimes can be forgotten if we just focus on one area of business sometimes.
Okay. Do you think black people as victims of crime are treated equally as, say, white victims of crime, given all the support that they require or that they should have, based upon your motto of protect and serve, in Aylesbury, Vale, and Thames Valley? What do you say?
So again, this is a national conversation that's going on because there is clear evidence that some black victims don't get the service that they deserve and should get, and white people get. I'd like to say I've never come across it on my area, and I haven't. But again, I'm not naive enough to suggest that that doesn't happen, because again, all the evidence shows that it's there at a national level. So Thames Valley Police is just one of those forces. So we've got to be alive to that. And again, education of our officers, making sure that we've got the scrutiny behind it. It should never get to a complaint process or a review process, but they are there to try and help that kind of issue for individuals. And equally, we have advocacy services to try and support it as well. So I'd be naive to say that it's not there, but we are very conscious of it and doing everything we can to make sure it doesn't happen.
One final question, which is, in terms of parents coming into the police station wanting to know, where's my child, where's my son, where's my daughter, do you think that they get sufficient support in terms of, information sharing and also direction as to getting a solicitor or seeking a barrister, if they need one? Do you think that in Thames Valley, Aylesbury for that matter, that occurs as a matter of course, that everyone is treated equally?
So is everyone treated equally when they get that inquiry? So they should do. I'd like to think they do, but I'm sure that there'd be people, white, black, Asian, and anyone else, that would say that they haven't got that service necessarily that they think they should have. We recognised some time ago, again as a wider service nationally, that people didn't necessarily understand the custody process and what happens when someone's arrested and how to go down that route with solicitors, for example. Again, there is evidence out there from an academic point of view around Black and Asian people being treated differently. We are much improved on that. There's a big difference, I think, over even in my career, my 27 years of delivering those explanations. It would be worth mentioning that if a parent comes in and their child is over 18, then the child is actually an adult, so they get treated quite differently. And we aren't at liberty to talk about anyone that's an adult in custody unless that person in custody gives us permission. However, obviously, if they're under 18, every person that's under 18 is entitled to an appropriate adult in custody to support them and guide them through. That always happens. That's an absolute given. Whether that is the parent themselves, because it can be, or whether it's someone else that's been selected because of their skills or abilities or equally qualifications. So there is a mix. And again, we do our absolute level best, but I could never say never, because it doesn't always go quite as we would like.
Okay. Well, we've gone a bit over our time, our hour, but it was a fascinating conversation, and the ease with which we spoke the first time, it's here now. And so I look forward to having further discussions with you in specific areas of policing, your engagement with the Black community. To the viewing public, you're invited to put forward your questions, and in our follow-up interviews with Rebecca, we'll explore those. So, Superintendent Rebecca Mears, thank you very much for talking to me.
Thank you, Calvin. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. And so we look forward to meeting you all again next time on this Code Red TV, Conversations on Race. We have to get it right. It's necessary for all of us. So let's do this just as Rebecca and I did, and talk easily about race. Because if we don't, then there may be consequences that we don't want to consider. We want to ensure that every citizen is afforded the opportunity to contribute effectively to the development of the country. And we can only do so if everyone is treated equally and fairly. So thank you all for listening, and see you all next time. Bye.